Good evening, everybody. This is Gene from NYC again, and I'm here with the review of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man issue 2. If you saw my review for issue 1, you no doubt know that I was quite upset with that issue to the point where I began ranting. I gave that issue an F. Now, this issue, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man issue 2, is much better. It is head and shoulders better than Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 1. That being said, this issue still has its issues, and I think that in the end, after having read it twice and skimmed it once, I think the cat can best illustrate how I feel after doing that. Tired. I feel tired after having read this twice and skimmed it once. It's not because necessarily reading it is hard, it's that it's not a terribly action-oriented story. So, let me start from the beginning, go through it, recount it as best I can, tell you what I liked, tell you what I disliked, and tell you what my final letter grade for this is. So, I'm going to start off with the cover. The cover is very good. It's a very simple picture. It's Spider-Man in his classic, crouching action pose on the building. I like the perspective. It's very close up. And I like the way his legs are drawn because they're drawn in this very odd, somewhat creepy way. As best I can describe it, I'm no artist, but it's a very odd, creepy way that's a bit unsettling, at least for me, being that I don't like spiders. But at the same time, the way his legs are drawn is reminiscent of a spider's legs. So I do think it's appropriate, and that's why I like it. I actually like the fact that it creeps me out slightly. So the cover's good. It's the rest of it that needs work. So the story starts out focusing on the mayor's office. Mayor Fisk is having a conversation with some unknown person. He's discussing in very vague details what seems to be the events of issue 1, in particular the abduction of Leilani, the woman who was living in fear. Keep in mind, she was opening her door for anybody who knocked, but she was living in fear. But anyway, so there's vague, at least what I believe to be vague references to her abduction, and then Mayor Fisk says that to whomever he's talking to, that they don't run the city anymore, that their arrangement has to be mutually beneficial. And it's basically setting up the supposed return of somebody to New York City. Now, whether this will be a new character that maybe has a history with Fisk or the city or city government, or if it's an older character, couldn't tell you. But apparently this is setting up the return or the reveal of some character. So next, it goes to Peter. He's in his Spider-Man costume. He's peeking out the blinds of his apartment, and he's trying to figure out what to do with the newfound issue at hand, which is Leilani's 2 children who were hidden in the laundry basket, which was revealed at the end of issue 1. There's a minor quibble I have here. There's a thought panel, which is basically several of Peter's thoughts are just meant to just sort of sum up the end of the issue. And it mentions that Peter got beat up. He wasn't beat up, he was punched exactly once. He got punched by this superpowered gangster-looking being. And it mentions that one of his roommates, the very flashy one who likes to prance around in pink underwear, is also a supervillain. Now, here's my issue with this. This is not consistent with the way that Peter's roommate was described in issue 1. In issue 1, the annoying, pink prancing roommate was described as a small-time villain. Now, in this thought box, in issue 2, he's described as a supervillain. Tom Taylor, please make up your mind and be consistent. Is this character a supervillain, or are they a 2-bit villain? One or the other. You're not being consistent here, and it's confusing. So moving on, Peter starts talking to the children, And for some reason, I don't know why the artist Juan Cabal went with this, but he has Peter in what I can only describe as a b-boy pose. I mean, like the head tilt, the arms crossed over the chest. I mean, I was looking at Spider-Man for a moment, like, are we in the Bronx in 1987? Is he about to break dance? Is he about to break it down? Cause it's a straight up b-boy stance. Like he's about to start doing windmills, and I'm just like, why? Why? Why of all poses to have Spider-Man in when he's talking to these two children, do you have him in this pose? Since when has Spider-Man ever been associated with breakdancing? But anyhow, so Spider-Man introduces himself. He asks the kids if they've ever heard of Spider-Man. They say no. The girl says that her name is Tiara. Her brother's name is Jasper, I believe it is. And that they're not from around here. Of course, from around here is very vague. That can mean anything from New York City to the USA to Earth. Given that they're kids that have blood orange toned skin, probably not from here, probably means not from Earth. But anyway, so Peter tries to shake Jasper's hand. Jasper doesn't want to shake his hand. Tiara explains that Jasper's very shy, he doesn't really want to talk. Peter accepts it. Tiara asks Spider-Man if his mother ever left him, because she doesn't understand why her mother left them. Peter says that his mother did leave him once, but he doesn't really elaborate. For those who are Spider-Man fans, is there any information on Spidey's parents, on his mother and father? Because I've never heard of them or anything about them. We all know about Aunt May and Uncle Ben, but I've never heard anything about his parents. So if you're like a big, knowledgeable Spidey fan, could you please tell me if what he said is true about at least what he's implying is that his mother left him or abandoned him. So could you please, if you know, help a sister out and let me know if Peter's mother did abandon him in some fashion, leave him at an orphanage, did leave him with Aunt May or Uncle Ben, whatever it is. So Peter then tells the kids that he'll find their mother, while he muses to himself that he needs to now, make this promise the truth. So he says that he has to leave to go find her. Tiara nervously asks if he's going to leave them alone. Peter says no. He puts in a phone call to somebody, tells the person to be discreet. Suddenly, there's a bell going off at the front door, and Peter freaks out because he's like, there's no way that the person I called could be here this quickly. So he has the kids hide in the wastebasket again. He stays in the room. And actually, the person coming to visit is the old lady from issue 1, Marnie, who will appear much later in the story. So Marnie comes in. She makes a few rude remarks at the expense of Peter's roommate, or at least one of his roommates, the dude in the underwear. And she then goes to Peter's door and just tells him that the police didn't show at Leilani's apartment, that his other roommate's still over there, and that there's some guy watching the building from across the street. Peter looks through the blinds of his window and sees that indeed there is someone there. The same gangster guy who punched him is still waiting there, watching the building. So right at that moment, Johnny Storm appears, and Johnny Storm appears in this really cool panel. It's a great panel. Again, Juan Cabal's art is sharp, it's good, but the problem is that it tends to be lifeless. I think this is very apparent in the many scenes that take place in Peter's room, because he doesn't leave his room for the longest, because the story spends so much time trying to, establish things and just do a lot of exposition. This is not a very action-heavy book. But the panel where Johnny comes in is a great classic scene. He's the biggest thing in the panel. He's right front and center. It's like he's flying at you. He's bright. the flames are coming off and he's leaving a trail of smoke behind him. It's a great panel. It's one of the, it's probably the second best panel in the book, art-wise, at least in my opinion. So Peter sees him and he starts freaking out. He's like, oh no, Johnny, I didn't want you to come in that way. So we then have this 4-panel shot, which in my opinion really should have been reworked because it's very suggestive in a certain way. So first of all, Peter, again, he's in a Spider-Man costume. He leans out the window because he's afraid that the gangster guy is gonna see Johnny, literally blazing across the sky. So he leans out. He again sticks his hand out just like that, right, to shoot the webbing, and we don't see the webbing leave his wrist. So again, that's another art error. That happens several times. There's only like one panel, I think, one or two panels toward the end, but we actually see the webbing actually coming out of his wrist. But anyway, so there's that issue. But then the next panel is that first panel is as much as the lack of webbing irks me, is forgivable. It's the next 3 panels that take this from an art error to way too suggestive for my taste for a general audience's book. So the way this webbing is depicted, because first he shoots it and then there's a close-up shot of it as it's flying toward the gangster guy. And all I can say is, and again, you can check the book online. Again, this is Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man #2. And the close-up panel of the webbing looks nothing, and I repeat, nothing like a close-up shot of spider webbing. The way it's drawn is very, I'm going to try to be I'm going to try to keep this as clean as I can, but I also have to be honest. The depiction of the webbing looks more like a certain thick, white, sticky fluid that tends to leave a certain area of the male body when the male body is sexually aroused and the male body needs to release because of that arousal. I have no doubt you know what I'm getting at. That's what it looks like. And I know that the webbing's always been a metaphor for that, but this is way too on the nose, especially when this webbing, quotation marks, hits the gangster guy in the face, splatters all over his face, covers his face. This is why I say it's so suggestive. Covers his face and snaps his neck back so hard that he's got whiplash. His head just snaps back so hard that his hat flies off his head. Tell me that ain't suggestive. That's just high pressure spider fluid. We'll just put it that way. And that's why I'm like, okay, you know what, that is too suggestive. That is too on the nose for what's supposed to be, relatively speaking, in all ages book. The artist really should have rethought this. I don't know if being this on the nose was intentional or not. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Really don't know. Can't read the guy's mind. But I wish that whoever is the art editor, or whether it's the regular editors or if there's a separate art editor, had caught that, because that was way too suggestive for my taste. So anyway, Johnny comes into Peter's room. They start talking. They have this little debate over whether or not Johnny was discreet with his mode of entry. So Peter then introduces him to the 2 kids, and Johnny's response is, "Are they mine?" So I actually did think that was funny because I'm just like, Johnny, what have you been doing, and who have you been doing to assume that 2 children who have a blood red orange complexion are your children? And that's sort of hinted at too with what Spider-Man says in a roundabout way. So Johnny introduces him. Well, Peter introduces Johnny to the kids, and he tries to explain that the boy doesn't talk. But then the kids light up when they see Johnny and they start talking, and it kind of bruises Peter's ego. There's this annoying running joke in this book that, people are not impressed with Spider-Man. And I will admit it frustrates me because this is Spider-Man, the hero. I understand people not being particularly impressed with Peter Parker. Right? Peter Parker's the regular guy, Peter Parker is the nerd. But this is supposed to be Spider-Man, right? The hero, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And I understand maybe like once or twice making that type of joke to sort of, keep Peter's ego in check, but to do this joke multiple times, to have every person he encounters, from the old lady to Lilani to now these kids, not be impressed with the fact that they're speaking with Spider-Man, or to think that he's not enough to provide them help. I'm not even a Spidey fan, but I just honestly find that insulting. I mean, he's Marvel's flagship character. Don't insult him like that. So anyway, now that the kids have someone to look after them, Peter pretty much just gives Johnny some instructions. Basically, don't leave the room, make sure that no one comes in, watch the kids. So Peter goes out, he starts a fight with the gangster guy. The gangster guy doesn't really fight him. They don't really fight each other, Peter and this superpowered gangster character. What happens is that the gangster starts punching the building that Peter's jumping all over. And so Peter actually has a few cool panels where he's using his webbing to catch the debris. But there comes a point where the building collapses, and there's some bystander, of course, who's live, tweeting, live recording everything, who's about to get crushed under this literal brick wall that's about to fall on him. And then there's this really cool panel, which I think is the best panel in the book. Really cool panel of Peter holding the wall up and yelling at the guy to escape. Unfortunately, because for some reason Tom Taylor thinks that Peter must try to be funny with every single thought panel and every single speech panel, or rather speech bubble, I should say. He has him say something to the effect of I remember when bystanders would do more by running instead of bystanding. I'm like, stop it. Tom Taylor, I beg of you, stop trying to write humor. Forced humor is not humor. People who are funny are not funny all the time, and they're not trying to be funny all the time. Write Spider-Man as a character, not as a caricature. He's not a comedian. He's a witty guy, but he's not a comedian. Just have him understand his character, have him respond in character to things, and the humor will come. Anyhow, so right after the bystander runs away, the wall collapses onto Peter, and then the next important panel is that this detective Shari Sebbins comes in and asks Spider-Man if he's okay. He says he is, but here's my issue with this panel. We don't see Spidey in pain. We don't see him struggling. He's literally covered in bricks, right? We saw him in the other panel where he's holding up the wall. He's straining to hold up the wall. He's digging his fingers in. And then when we see him again after the wall's collapsed on him, again, a wall has collapsed on him. He's literally just lying there under the rubble with one hand behind his head like he's chilling on a beach. This undercuts the seriousness of the situation. And it does not make Peter look strong or look like a hero. It makes him look like he does not take the situation seriously. So that's my issue with that panel. Now, the issue I have with the character of Shari is not with her character, but with her character design. First of all, she's dressed in a man's suit. She has the button-down shirt. She has this cardigan on over it. And then she's wearing this powder blue man's suit. The slacks, the jacket. And the jacket is way too big. It's too long. And it's too big. She looks awful in it. It's a terrible character design. And I have a few questions. First of all, why must she be in a man's suit? I understand wanting to put her in a suit to give her a sense of authority. She's a police detective. Okay, I get that. Women have suits. We have skirt suits. We have pantsuits. I even understand putting her in a pantsuit because she's going to, a crime scene where a building just collapsed. I would certainly want to walk, if I had to walk up into that situation, I would certainly prefer pants over a skirt too. But again, why must she be dressed in a poorly fitted man's suit? This whole, forcing or shoehorning of the atypical female character in comics is getting annoying. And I am a masculine woman. I'm a tomboy. I am the atypical woman, and even I am getting tired of this. More importantly, if they had to go with this character design, why not make it look good? Why not make her character stand out in a positive way? Because I don't think this is supposed to be a case of, oh, this is just her fashion sense. It's supposed to be a visual representation of the fact that she has no sense of fashion. Because Peter never says anything to her about her clothes. And I think that he would have, or she would have, said something about her own clothes if this was meant to be a case of she doesn't know how to dress, and this is a character quirk. I think this is supposed to be how she looks and how she intends to look. And it's not a good look. Even if you have to go with the masculine woman thing, which I don't agree with, but if you have to go with the woman in a masculine suit thing, there are so many better examples that Juan Cabal could have learned from. He could have looked at Shizuru from Yu Yu Hakusho. He could have looked at the short-haired blonde girl from Sailor Moon. He could have looked at King from King of Fighters. He could have looked at Zatanna because she at times wears a variation of a man's tuxedo because she's a Vegas performer. Could have looked at King from the KOF games. I think I already said that. And even could have looked at Mary J. Blige in the Just Fine video. There's a point toward the end of the video when she's when I can't get the word out. When she's dancing in a purple tuxedo, a purple man's tuxedo, and she looks good in it. A woman can look good in a masculine suit or in a man's suit, but you have to make sure it's well fitted. It has to look right. So again, I don't understand why Juan Cabal went with this character design, but I don't like it. And I hope that I've explained why. It's not... I think it's ill thought out, basically. I think it's ill thought out in many, many, many ways. So, afterward, Detective Sebbins says that Spider-Man saved her family. She's the wife of the guy from the first issue who drove the truck off the bridge, and Spider-Man saved him and their daughter. So she's very thankful. So Spidey asks her to run the plates from the car that the gangster guy got away in. She agrees to do so. They meet up on top of the roof of a police precinct, and again, Spider-Man, right? The hero. The guy constantly, crouching down, always tense, is sitting on the side of some structure on the roof like he's sitting on a train. Like he's sitting on a train playing with his phone. Again, this is supposed to be a superhero comic. Spider-Man is supposed to be an action hero. Having him sit around does not look good. It undercuts the action, which is not good because there was hardly any action in this comic as it was. Tom Taylor, Juan Cabal, learn Learn superhero storytelling. Read How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. Learn about dynamic posing. Learn about angles and how to draw them so that the hero always comes off looking dynamic and strong. Like he's moving or he's about to make a move. There should always be this sense of movement or this sense of tension. Having Spider-Man sitting on the side of some structure on a rooftop, like he's sitting on the train, is the complete opposite of what superhero comics are. Anyway, to continue, Detective Sevens says that she ran the plates, and the plates are from an old building in the 50s that hasn't been used in decades. She then gives Spider-Man, I should say, her card. Spidey says that he has to tuck the card into his pants because he doesn't have pockets, and for some odd reason, she gets offended by the fact that he has to tuck the card into his tights. First of all, we don't even see him tuck the card into his tights because the moment he's supposed to be doing it is poorly drawn. The way it's drawn, it makes it look like the card is somehow either glitching through him, somehow passing through him, or phasing through him. It doesn't look right. We don't see him, for example, pull up the hem of his shirt or tug on the waistband of his pants to indicate that there's separation on the waistline, and we don't see him actually tuck the card into the waistline. It literally looks like he's trying to insert it into his waistline. It doesn't look right. And even if it did look right, why is she so upset that Spider-Man is going to carry her business card in his tights? Okay, not his underwear, just his tights. Especially when he explains to her that he has no pockets in the suit anyway. This is a New York City police detective. I have no doubt that she has given her card and given her contact information to people in less clothing in odder circumstances. Again, I think this was an attempt at humor, but it fell flat. It wasn't funny, it just left me confused. So, Peter, actually, this is a really cool panel, which transitions to the next and final scene, where Peter's again still in the Spider-Man outfit. It's a little later in the day, it looks like early evening, and he's hanging upside down. It's a really nice panel. So it goes from this really nice panel where he's hanging upside down and observing things to this really meh panel where he walks through the gates of this old building, and he doesn't look. His shoulders are sloped. He doesn't look powerful or confident in any way. He literally looks like somebody who's dressed as Peter Pan for Halloween walking to an old spooky building. This is supposed to be the superhero, not the cosplayer, not the Halloween guy. The superhero. Can we please have him look like a superhero? So anyway, he approaches the building, realizes that it was a consulate, but doesn't know what for, whose consulate it was. Then the superpowered gangster guy attacks him, and the Spidey dodges his punch. Then he does this flip, which goes off panel, which means that it's cut off by the borders of the panel. So you have Spider-Man flipping into the sky, but you can't see him because the bulk of his body's cut off by the borders of the panel. Imagine for a moment you were watching gymnastics, and every time a gymnast did a flip or did some sort of twist move, they were cut off by the paneling of the camera, and you couldn't see it. It would look awful and you would stop watching, because the most impressive thing about gymnastics is seeing the flips and seeing the spins. That's the fun part. That's the visually pleasing part. You don't cut the cool part out of the book. You don't cut the appealing thing out of the frame. I shouldn't have to explain this. This is like, storytelling 101. Show and or describe the cool thing. Anyway, So they have this little fight. Spider-Man's basically just flipping around. Then Marnie, who's the old lady from issue 1 and from earlier in this issue, walks up into the scene. Spider-Man is surprised to see her, asks her if she's a part of this situation. Then she tells Spidey to look out because the other guy's about to attack him. But before Spidey can even respond, she pushes him out the way. She pushes him out of the way, knocks the superpowered gangster thug down, punches his head down into the ground to the point where the ground cracks with one punch. One punch. One punch! I had to, I'm sorry. And the dude's just down. He's out like a light. She then reveals that she's a hero or heroine known as the Rumor. Aside from, obvious 80s references, I heard a rumor. I don't understand what the point of this character is. I mean, we already have a little old lady character in Madam Web in Spider-Man. Why not just bring back Madam Web? I don't know if this Rumor character is a genuinely new character, or if she's maybe a D-list or an E-list character from some sort of bygone book from like 30 or 40 years ago. But I don't understand bringing her back, and more importantly, I don't understand why, again, Peter has to get punked in his own book. First, he was punked by the gangster thug in issue 1 when the guy knocked him out with one punch. And now he gets punked again by the Rumor, who knocks out the thug with one punch. As a reader, I'm just frustrated. It's like, why should I keep reading this? I will give this one more issue. I'll give it one more issue. I'll give it issue 3. If it doesn't impress me, I'm done with this. Because I'm tired of reading about a Peter Parker who's being punked. Who's being, just denigrated in a story that's supposed to be about him. This is supposed to be about the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Not the friendly neighborhood, do-gooder who gets knocked out in one punch and then needs an old granny to save him. This is a better issue than issue 1. Issue 1 was a flat F. So this is head and shoulders above that, but still, it needs a lot of work. I give it a C-. So that's my review. Tell me what you think. I hope you have a good night. This is Gene from New York City, and I am out.